Welcome back to the Connected Yoga Teacher podcast. Wow, 2025 feels like it's been a lot already, and we are still in January if you're listening in real time. I just want to say first, before we start to get into things, that my heart goes out to all of the community, all of the friends, all of our listeners who have connections, which is all of us, to California. And as we watch things really happening there with the destruction, with the wildfires, I just want to say my heart goes out to everyone who's also feeling the impacts of that. And that's all of us, because we're connected to the earth. Also, as we sit in anticipation of a possible ceasefire, as I'm recording this, that's tomorrow, for our Palestinian friends, so many emotions. And to our U.S. listeners and friends, wow, we are holding you in our hearts as you welcome in a government that does not feel inclusive, does not feel like it is welcoming and taking care of people, in my view. And if you disagree with me, make sure you let me know. I'm here to listen. That's the way we go on the podcast. We talk about a lot of things, and a lot of things are happening. I've been chatting with friends this week who are telling me how much January of 2025 has already impacted them. And so if that's you, here's an episode that we have put together to really kind of nurture you, make you feel like, okay, we've got this together, and yoga is part of this. So if you are new here, let me first say I'm thrilled that you found us. Maybe we haven't met before. If not, I'm your host, Shannon Crow. My pronouns are she, her, hers. I'm a yoga teacher, a mom of 3, entrepreneur, and forever curious student. This podcast is being recorded on the traditional land of the Anishinaabe, Odawa, and Mississauga people. If you are looking on a map, you'll see the colonized name, which is Bruce Peninsula in Ontario, Canada. Here we connect yoga teachers to ideas, resources, and each other. Whether you're just starting out or you're well into your journey, this space is for you to feel supported and inspired. Because I get it, connected yoga teachers. I remember what it felt like to leave that first yoga teacher training and just thinking, oh my goodness, now what? How do I do this? If you are a returning listener, I am so grateful that you're back here. Thanks for hanging out. Let's dive right in. First of all, I just want to share a personal story of this morning. So I just got off the phone with a friend right before I hit record who was apologizing to me for sleeping in today. Now, let me just say, I'm recording this on a Saturday. It's the weekend. It's full-on winter where we live. And this friend had nowhere to be this morning. She's also retired, and she had a very intense week supporting a loved one. And so why was she being so hard on herself? And the question I'm sitting with this morning is, why are we all being so hard on ourselves at times? And others as well. So our inner critic can be really loud. Sometimes that judgment toward others gets really loud, whether we express it or it's just internal. So today's episode is all about relaxing. It's okay if you fall asleep. It's okay if you sleep in. Get a cup of tea. Maybe you have a little art project you're working on and you want to do that. Maybe you're like, you know what? I have to do some cleaning, but I'm also going to listen and be kind to myself today. Today's episode is really a pep talk on cultivating self-acceptance. Now, we talk to our yoga students about this, and I think we could all use it in our own lives. So next time your brain is telling you that you need to be someone different or look different or have something different to be better, come back and have a listen to this episode with Donna Noble. Today's episode is powered by OfferingTree. I use and love the software in my own business because it automates everything. Bookings, payments, Zoom links, reminders, and so much more. I was just telling a yoga teacher this week, you know what? If you don't love building websites or figuring out tech, put your membership and your website with OfferingTree. I like it because it really simplifies things for yoga teachers and studios. And we have a discount code for you over at offeringtree.com/Shannon. Now let's dive into today's episode. So we are joined by Donna Noble, who's a yoga teacher, an advocate for inclusivity, accessibility, and diversity in yoga. Donna shares her really inspiring story of how she used yoga to overcome personal challenges, including waking up with Bell's palsy. Donna has a mission to create welcoming spaces for everyone, regardless of body type, background, or ability. Today, we dive into Donna's philosophy on self-acceptance, gratitude, and the transformative power of mindfulness, along with her work in addressing unconscious biases and fostering social justice in yoga. So let's dive in and have a listen to this conversation with Donna and I. Welcome to the Connected Yoga Teacher podcast, Donna. It's so great to have you here.
Thank you for having me, Shannon. It's an absolute pleasure to be here.
I'm really excited that I finally get to meet you in person. I mean, on Zoom, but still, I've been following your work for a long time, and it's just really exciting to have you here. So, for our listeners who maybe don't know who you are, what's the work that you do, and who do you do it for?
The work that I do basically is to share yoga, and specifically to encourage people that don't believe yoga's for them. So I have a sort of body positive, inclusive, accessible, diverse slant to it as well. Because I see, Shannon, that so many people want to do yoga, but because of what the mainstream is saying, they don't think it's for them. So I try to debunk it as much as possible and to share and take yoga to those individuals so they can see that they too can do yoga, because I believe if you can breathe, you can do yoga, and that everybody has a yoga body. If you're doing yoga and you have a body, you have a yoga body.
Oh my gosh, this is such an important message, because I talk to way too many people who say to me, you know what, I can't do yoga because I'm not flexible enough, or I can't move like that, or, I've seen yoga and no way, I can't do that. So what do you tell people in that moment when they say to you, yeah, I can't put my foot behind my head, so I can't do yoga?
Well, I straight away I say, okay, so yoga begins off the mat. That's the real yoga for me. And I say, so in your everyday life, what can getting your leg behind your head do for you? A party trick. But if you're able to connect to your breath, it can help you to eliminate stress. So I show them the benefits of coming to yoga, but also that in terms of flexibility, yoga not only allows you to be flexible in your body, but also in your mind. So, and that yoga will accept you as you are. There's nothing you have to be. There's nothing you have to do. Show up as you are. And I also believe, Shannon, that we're all born yogis, and we're all doing yoga without even realizing it. If you're bending over in standing forward fold, you're doing up your shoelaces, you're doing a yoga pose. If you're lying on your bed in Savasana, you're spread out as wide as possible, Savasana. So there are ways in which you're already doing yoga, and the example I love to give is in the womb, invariably, most of us are in the universal posture, fetal position. And if you're sleeping at night and you're doing the same thing, you're doing a yoga pose. So there's many ways in which yoga shows up in our everyday life without us even realizing it. And if you can do those things, and even eat and simply breathing, the breath is key to yoga. You're doing it.
I love this so much. I want to dig in and talk about something that I hear all over right now in the yoga world. And I thought, you're the person to ask about this. And that is the topic of self-love. So tell me, what are your thoughts on when you hear someone say, all right, let's work on self-love?
That's a very good question, Shannon. And I think I can understand why people are saying that. for people to be compassionate with themselves. But self-love is not an easy thing to achieve. Because of societal conditioning, a lot of us have issues with how we look. So what I normally say, first of all, is cultivating self-acceptance. If we can appreciate our bodies for all the things that it does for us without asking, we become accepting of ourselves and see that we are fine as we are. Don't have to change. Wouldn't the world be a very boring place if we all looked the same? If we try to be molded into this perfect body that I don't believe exists. And the fact of the matter, Shannon, is that we can appreciate how two flowers never look the same, and we can appreciate that. So why then, as humans, are we trying to make ourselves into something that doesn't exist in terms of perfection? And for me, once I began to accept myself and appreciate my body, then I believe we can start to possibly, doesn't have to be the end goal, self-love.
What do you think helped you in your life or in your yoga practice? What were some of the things that early on you thought, this is really helping me to accept, like the shape that I am, the person that I am, the whole package?
I don't know if you know, Shannon, but I suffered with Bell's palsy. So I went to bed and then woke up and had a very visible illness overnight. And I was always this outgoing person, Shannon, always in front of the camera, always smiling. And suddenly I didn't feel comfortable with how I looked anymore. So I went on this journey of seeing how people accepted me. Some still saw me as Donna, and others weren't comfortable with how I looked. They didn't want to really speak about what I did. So I had the condition, Shannon, for about 5 years. And yoga was very instrumental or key in my healing, because I had it for about 5 years, I just said. But what happened when the yoga began to slow me down, because I believe the condition came about because I was burnt out. I had a very stressful job. I came from a corporate background. The body then began to heal naturally. So no matter what the doctors told me to do, didn't help at all. And because I started to pursue a more holistic lifestyle, like acupuncture, I saw how my body then began to respond to the changes. And by seeing how amazing my body was, and I'm sure like a lot of us do, we take it for granted because we're born with it. And by seeing that, and being able to accept how I looked, because I thought I was going to look the same way as I did for the rest of my life. So I became very accepting of it. But my body began to change, and I began to heal. And once I saw that, Shannon, I began to accept my body as it was, because I then knew that it would do what it needed to do for me in terms of my weight, that it would be whatever weight was right for me at the time, or whatever I was going through. The body adapts. The fact, Shannon, that I can have an injury and how the more dominant side will take over to help with the weaker side. But being a yoga teacher, we know how to try to create that balance. But just seeing how the body adjusts without asking, or how it will switch off a part of the body because it can see that our body needs to have rest. How we thought we can't force ourselves to go to sleep, but our body will make us go to sleep if we need to, because it knows we need the rest. And by realizing that, that's how I began to accept myself for all it was, and didn't get so focused, Shannon, on how it looked. The most important thing for me became how my body felt, and knowing that when and that mind body connection, that I could tell when I was not in my body fully, being distracted, and coming back to that, and slowing down and finding the pause. And that for me was an amazing experience.
Thank you so much for sharing that story. It's really powerful to hear when we have anything happen in the body. I know that through the years, I've had various injuries, illnesses, and you learn a lot from those for sure. What what would you say to someone if they're dealing with a lot of messages that are, those messages that live in all of us at some point in our lives where we think, gosh, I'm looking at this person and they look a certain way and I want to look that way. And then we start beating ourselves up, like, or we see someone who's just like, you know, they have more yoga students than me, or they are a better parent. Look at how perfectly they made that cake. Whatever it is, where we're comparing ourselves to others and we're beating ourselves up. What would you suggest as a practice in that moment for that person?
I think to be gratitude for what we have. And I think when any of those maybe thoughts arise, be grateful, because someone will be grateful for what you have. You may not appreciate that. So we sometimes, Shannon, we can moan about the most minute. Sometimes it can be the most minute things, but to us in that moment, it's the most important thing ever. But when we come back to being grateful, we begin to realize that it maybe is not so important, and to let some of those things go. I think as well. That's what happened to me, letting things go. And we say a lot of yoga teachers, but when you actually do it and realize that, I'm sweating something really small, it's not important. And I know I'm not trying to make it sound like it's an easy thing, because every once in a while we all may go back there. We're human beings. But what I realize now in the bigger picture, Shannon, is that maybe what I'm seeing isn't how it really is. That person that may be appearing perfect out there on social media, it's a highlight reel. I don't know what's going on behind closed doors. So I now see that more. And there's times when I may be look up to somebody, Shannon, and I know that they're freaking out behind the scenes. And so now it's like, oh, I always think, what really is going on? And it's like, you know what? Be very careful what you wish for, because things may not always appear as they seem. And that the fact, Shannon, that we are here, we're alive, something to be grateful for, and to be in the moment more, because a lot of the times we're either in the future or in the past, and we can't change those things. And the only moment that's guaranteed is that present moment. And a lot of the thoughts we have, our thoughts create our reality. And those thoughts are temporary. And if we remember that, life will become become simpler, because we know that not to get caught up in that thought, and that thought will create something else, a bigger storm or cloud or whatever, and we become depressed. Because when you look at it, Shannon, when we're happy, we don't really get behind those thoughts. The thoughts come and go. But something goes wrong in an instant, and it's like, oh my God, Shannon gave me. It's like, oh, that person couldn't get that bus. The door closed on me or whatever. Then I saw and Shannon gave me side eye. So I begin to blow everything out of proportion. That person cut me up, and we get angry, we get stressed. But it's like, just let it go, because that person that we're maybe berating in our cars, they've gone, and we're no concern of them, and they're happy as Larry. But we're there holding on to this stuff and getting more and more stressed, and wasting that energy.
Oh my gosh, you're just making me think of this situation that I just had where I really worked myself up for weeks about
Yeah.
something. It was in my personal life. It was to do with like a family member. And when I was actually in the moment, this really stuck with me. I was like, this isn't that big of a deal. Like, I made this into a huge deal. I worried about it. I thought about it. I played it over in my brain, and I'm fine. We're all fine.
Yeah, exactly. And I think, and there's a saying, I can't remember if I say it right, but it's like almost like that person's not paying rent, and they're in your brain.
Yeah. Yeah.
you know yeah, and remember that you can change. We have the ability to change our thoughts. Thoughts are like clouds in the sky, so I said, and the mind is always there, neutral, like the sky is there, and then light fluffy clouds come and they go. So the good thoughts come. But as soon as the dark clouds come, those are the ones that we tend to hang around. And it's okay, but we know at some point that thought will go, and it can go in an instant. It could be like you're in a mood, and then someone rings you, and it's like someone you want to hear from, and you're happy, and you did nothing to change that thought. It happened. Or you see a beautiful sunset or sunrise, and you get caught up in the moment. By being in the moment, you're able to enjoy those things more. Thoughts are transient, and we can choose which ones we get behind some of the times. Not all the time, but some of the times as well. And then you find that you're happier because of that. You're not getting so caught up with anxiety and stress, which all these things can lead to.
Connected yoga teachers, let's be real. Managing a yoga business can be so overwhelming and messy. OfferingTree makes it much easier. It's like having a personal assistant where you have help with your scheduling. I was just thinking of this today. Someone had asked me if we could book a consultation call, and it's so easy for me to go in, plug in someone's name, click on the calendar, get them scheduled in, or send them a link so that they can see my calendar availability and book in and pay and do all of that. So if you're looking for a way to have your schedule organized, accept online payments, have a website, possibly also a membership or a video library, Zoom integration and time zones, all of this is included with OfferingTree. It's specifically designed for yoga teachers and yoga studios. If you want to check it out, make sure to use our podcast listener discount. That's over at OfferingTree.com/Shannon. Again, that's OfferingTree.com/Shannon. Now, I want to clarify with this because I know that you wrote about in your book and you talk about and you teach about inclusivity, including making yoga accessible. You do diversity, equity, inclusion training. So I know that you get into the world of social justice. So I just want to clarify here, tell our listeners the difference between, acknowledging those thoughts, knowing that they're going to pass, working on changing your thoughts in that way versus like that toxic positivity, like that,
So, yeah.
love and
So
light, everything's
love
fine,
and
just
light, yeah,
focus.
everything's fine. Yeah, I don't see colour and all those things there as
Yeah.
well. Yeah, but I always bring it back then, Shannon, to unconscious bias. That we have unconscious bias, and some of it is hereditary because if we see a snake, the way we respond is like fear. But when we begin to look at people and judge them solely based on how they look, then that's a whole other thing, and it's not a good thing because then stereotypes come into it. But what we need to do, Shannon, is unlearn our unconscious bias. I always say you can never judge a yogi by how they look. That you may, because people, our students judge us as well. So, say for instance, you see someone that comes in that may look mature, so you think, oh, they're going to need a beginner's practice. So we've made a judgment there, but that may be so wrong in that respect. So I tend to let that individual show me on the mat what they do. And I try not to have any judgments about that. I'm sure in the beginning, when I started my journey, I did like everyone else, but then it's by unlearning what I've learned, I began to see, and I've been proven wrong so many times in the past. So and there's times in my teaching where I've made an assumption and it's been completely wrong. And so now I tend to reserve judgment. And through the teachings that I've done, the courses that I've done, I've been able to learn how to do that and share that. And also, as you say, one of the things we see, like I have a lived experience, Shannon, and if you are dismissive of that, spiritual bypassing will come into that. And so you're not acknowledging my lived experience, and you may come away and say, you sure that happened, Donna? Like, I may say someone said something to me that I didn't sit right with me. But we need to, as teachers or anybody, be able to acknowledge that person's lived experience. That's how we honor it, and not just, love and peace, or I don't see color. And that's one I hear a lot. I can understand the sentiment behind it. But if you aren't able to acknowledge my color, then you can't acknowledge my lived experience, the things that I go through on a daily basis. It could be what an example I've experienced before, Shannon, and it doesn't bother me so much now. I've gone to cover classes, and I'm not as a cover teacher. And I've had people walk out because they've seen the colour of my skin, and they literally walked out of the class. Or I remember there was another example. A lady came to a class here in London, and she said maybe she was questioning my ability as a teacher, and she said, "I've got to leave within half an hour." But I thought it's a 60-minute class. I said, "Okay, you come. I allow you to go." She didn't make any phone calls, and she came straight into the room. I think that was just an excuse. And then when she was able to experience my experience and ability, she stayed for the entire class. I was pleasantly surprised. So you kind of get that sometimes as well. So these judgments based on that. So maybe she was too embarrassed to leave, but she then sort of deemed that she would give me a chance, and then she had that caveat, if I was not really good, that she could have left. So there's times like that where you get that. Or there's times now, Shannon, where I see myself that I'm, I call it tokenism, where someone comes to me to validate them, so so they don't get called out about not being diverse. There's different ways we see it, and when you speak to someone about it, then getting someone to acknowledge that and accept it is fine. I'm not asking you to go out there and champion and fight for me, but acknowledge that, because you never know what your students are going through in their everyday life as well, what they deal with off the mat. And as teachers, we need to create safe, judgment-free spaces. And that's why social justice plays a big part of yoga. If it's based in your practice or your teaching in ahimsa, it has to then have social justice at its core as well.
This is amazing. Oh my gosh, you fit so much in there. What I took away from that, like a key takeaway, was all of a sudden, this is all sort of our internal work.
Yeah.
When we're looking at our biases, I see.
Biases, I see.
And when we are, I love how you said listening to someone's lived experience and really believing them in that. That is a huge piece of it. Someone came to me and said, "I think I was treated differently when I went to my doctor because of my skin color."
Yeah.
I want to believe that person. Like I'm not going to be like, "That can't be true," which I've heard that argument. Well, I get that it should not be true.
Exactly.
But it is someone's experience. And I love how you talked about, so when I'm thinking now about our own thoughts, when you said we can change our thoughts, but that doesn't mean we can change the experience of the world. Like if you came to me and you said, "I felt really uncomfortable as the teacher in this class."
Yeah.
And I said, "Just think positive. Just focus on, just change your thoughts,
go.
Donna."
Let it go. Or let it go.
Just let it go. Right.
All right. So yeah, and that's the thing. So we need to. That's why for me, Shannon, I've unlearned to relearn, because my teachings have come from a very Western perspective. But in doing that, I've learned about social justice. You don't find social justice in a lot of mainstream TTs or about teaching to various populations. So by doing that, unconscious bias came very much into my remit, that maybe I had unconscious bias, by maybe looking at someone in the past and thinking, "Oh my gosh, how can they do that? Their size, that they go to the doctors, another scenario, and they're told, oh, you need, they have a condition, and that condition is not even considered. The doctor's convinced that it's based on it's the weight that's causing the issue, and it's not. So people are being dismissed in that. But if we can cultivate that in the yoga space, that will filter out into the everyday world, because we don't know who's in front of us as students. It could be a doctor in there. So you don't know, that's that tiny ripple, be the change we want to see in the world, will ripple out. Because we think that, as teachers, Shannon, I began to see that we don't have to accept everything, because a lot of us are out there fighting the good fight and creating the change. And sometimes we don't even realize the impact or the changes that we're making. When I started out, Shannon, I didn't intend to be a body positive yoga teacher. It was exercise. It was a friend of mine saw a picture of Madonna and said, "Let's try yoga," because Madonna looked really good at that point. She had a leg behind her head. And And I was lucky enough that we had a teacher, a trainee teacher that was able to take us into the boardrooms, and we started the journey there. But along the way, and what I've seen, Shannon, is that yoga for me at that point was more diverse. I've been practicing now since the late 1990s. So I had no preconception about what yoga was. I didn't even know anything until I saw Madonna doing yoga. I didn't know what it was. Because in those days, like, yoga was like, oh, woo woo and something alternative thing, you know? And when I started my journey, my first teacher was South Asian, my colleague. Then I had a teacher that was mixed heritage. And then I wasn't going to any mainstream class at the time, so I was going to local studios, and there were two Afro-Caribbean teachers that had one of the first studio of that time owned by Afro-Caribbean people in South London. So I didn't feel as though I was anything different. So to me, it was quite diverse. But so for me, the more established I became in this journey, the less diverse it became. As I began to go in the mainstream, I would then see or find that I was the only person of color who looked like me in those spaces. And that still happens now. And I'm the teacher, because we still don't, people still don't believe yoga's for them, because the yoga image, Shannon, what the image is. If you Google, put the word yoga in, and the images that we see there. So why the hell would anyone think that if you can't be, that's maybe wrong. You won't be what you can't see, because you may not then consider it as an option for you.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. I love that you had this diverse experience first off.
Yeah. And it was, and I became body positive, Shannon, when I came to America, because even being a yoga teacher was never part of my plan. It was like corporate life, and that was it. But after the universe or whatever had different plans for me, and slowly but surely, then that path began to unfold, the yoga path, because I did yoga, liked it, gave it up to do my master's degree, then came back to it because I was starting to work, had an in-house gym, and they brought yoga in, and I remember how much I loved it. And then from there, it stuck. But it was Bikram yoga, surprisingly, that really had the impact. And a friend of mine saying, Donna, you need a plan B. And I thought, why do I need a plan B? How the car, the job, all the things society told me that is good, but I wasn't happy. And I was studying because I was in IT, so I was always studying for exams in that field. So it made sense then that, okay, plan B, let me look at maybe doing yoga. And maybe when I retire, I can do yoga if I get bored. That was the plan. And anyone that knows me, Shannon, knows I like to do things quite quickly. So I didn't do like a 1-year course. So I did a 18-month course, so I could afford 1 weekend per month to study, and did that. And it wasn't something I needed immediately. And then my job was being made redundant, and I still didn't even factor in yoga as a career at that point. I was still going to go back into the corporate world. It wasn't until I was doing a master NLP practitioner course that shows I was kind of leaning to, wanting to know about the mind and how everything worked together, that one of the coaches said to me, what's going on with you? And I explained that I'm having to leave my job and I don't know what to do. And she said, of course you know. I don't. She said, yes, you do. She said, unconsciously you do. And she said, when you talk about yoga, you light up. And when you talk about corporate, you don't. And in that instant, it's like, okay, I'll finish the course I'm doing. So I'll take time out in between jobs. And then what I'll do is I was loving the hot yoga at the time. And it was literally the hot, trendy yoga at that moment in time. I thought I can come back to the UK and I can get work, because there wasn't that many teachers doing yoga. And if you wanted to do hot yoga at the time, Shannon, it was only being done twice a year in America. Wow. You had to come to LA and spend 9 weeks and do the training. And so I thought, okay, I'll get work. So I came to America, LA, should have been there for 11 weeks. It was going to be 9 weeks of the training, 2 weeks to maybe travel around a little bit and teach to get my experience, because all these studio owners would come to the training and try to recruit us to train for them, because they were short of teachers at that point. And I stayed for 6 months. So I began to change from there. So I traveled around, went to LA, traveled around America rather. So I went to LA, did the training, then I went to Rochester, New York, and spent about 4 weeks there. And I went to Texas and spent the remainder of the time there. And it was amazing. I loved it. And that's where I began. I think I began to become body positive because I could see, because America at that point, and still is more advanced in having yoga as part of its culture, so to speak, than the UK. And so I came back and I began to see that there were certain people missing from the yoga space. And that's when I think I began to start trying to reach individuals that I saw that were missing.
That's amazing. I also am curious if you think it was the yoga practice that worked on you in terms of, like, I'm just going to make this huge leap of a guess based on my understanding that from the Bikram classes I've been to, or the hot yoga classes that I've been to, and from what I've heard from people who studied with Bikram, there wasn't a lot of self-acceptance weaved in. Now, maybe I'm wrong. Correct me if I'm wrong, but like, how do you think
No,
you got there? Like,
because what I found and got there for me, and it depended on some teachers, there was self-acceptance, so there was some, it's not the teachers. And I think some teachers got it wrong because Bikram could be very harsh in the way that he taught. But apparently in the public classes he weren't. He was more compassionate. But what the teachers saw during those 9 weeks is what they then put out into the everyday, and that was wrong. But you did have those that saw the other side and were more compassionate. So it depended on the teachers, and maybe I gravitate to more of those. But for me, what Bikram gave me, the very first experience that I had of it, Shannon, it was quite transformational because I didn't have time for the class, and my friend was meant to come with me. It was a bank holiday weekend, and I went out the night before, wasn't expecting, and said I'm going to go on the Monday morning. And I was so busy that I thought if I don't go on the Monday, I won't get a chance, an opportunity to go there because it wasn't something I had incorporated in my life, so I wouldn't miss it. So I couldn't go in the morning. So I've gone out, Shannon, and had quite a bit to drink. If I'd got into the room, I would have killed over. I think I would have killed over. I wouldn't be able to stand for the night, the 90 minutes, because it was only ever 90 minutes at that point. There was no 60, 45. It was only 90 minutes.
right.
And so I went to the last class. I think it was only 2 classes there. So I went to the 5 o'clock class, did everything wrong. So I drank the night before, hadn't drank any water to hydrate myself, went to the hottest part of what I discovered was the room at the time. And I think that was it. But I went, Shannon, and I came out of that room, the hangover disappeared, sweated it out. And in eagle pose, I could only hook my foot on one side in an ordinary class. But in Bikram, after 15 minutes, I could do the other side. So I saw how the heat was changing my body, that my body relaxed more, and that was it. And I came out on a yoga high. My skin felt amazing. I was hooked. And I felt as though I died and was reborn. Having that stressful job, Shannon, it was the only yoga at the time that could get me out of my bed in a yoga studio at 6:30 a.m.
I love this because I hope people are listening. One, you did yoga at your corporate job. So
Yeah.
someone was coming in there and teaching yoga. Two, like once you experience Bikram yoga, which, I give it a bad rap, lots of people do. Connected yoga teachers, I'm popping in here for a moment because I want to tell you that we have a whole podcast where Rebecca Sebastian and Colin Hall and Josh and other yoga teachers were really joining together in a call about the harm that's been caused by Bikram, the person, not Bikram, the yoga style, just to clarify, although those are connected. The episode is episode 312. So if you go over to theconnectedyogateacher.com and you search for episode 312, or you can use our search bar and search for Bikram, you'll come up with this episode for sure. We really talked about how we stand with survivors. And this was when Bikram was trying to come to Canada and teach in Canada. And that didn't happen, thanks to many yoga teachers who stood up and said, we stand and believe survivors, and we are acknowledging the harm that Bikram has caused So I just want to link to that episode in case you're like, what does Shannon have against Bikram? You'll be able to hear much more than my opinion in this episode. Okay, let's get back into our conversation with Donna Noble. You did yoga, Bikram yoga, at your corporate job. It still brought you to where you are today, where you're really using yoga in your own life, off the mat. Yoga helped you like in so many ways. It's really something. I'm
Um,
just taken away, like yoga works away on us because
yeah,
it's
no,
an
it does.
ancient practice.
And the thing of it is though, because the 26 and 2, because you start with the breathing, so and it's a moving meditation. If you get the right teacher, you're out of your head. If I go to a class, Shannon, and I haven't done Bikram, I do it at home. But if I'm on my shopping list, I won't go back to that teacher, because the whole point of all that dialogue is to bring you out of your head into the space. So you
Right.
start meditation process. And what I loved about Bikram, it got me out of corporate, because then I went but also with all the crap I was dealing with at work, going there first thing in the morning, it set me up so well for the rest of the day. I could deal with all the crap. I wasn't stressed out anymore. And it gave me something to leave work on time to do. Like, I'd want to go to the 5 o'clock class. I'd leave work on time and like, what's I doing? It was unheard of. I'd go home and work. So it started to change me. I became less stressed and became more mindful of what I was doing. So that's what it did for me. And that's why I didn't realize how profoundly it affected me, because when I'm teaching sometimes on training course, I refer back to Bikram, the practice. And what I loved as well, Shannon, is when you teach a class of 90 people and they all move as one, that energy, only Bikram practice I can ever experience that, because they're all coming there up the different, they're going in the future because they know the practice, and you say come back, and I say something like, there's no point in me being here, because I'm here to guide you and you're going ahead of me. You're not in the 12 o'clock class, you're in the 1 o'clock class, you're ahead of me. And then when you get them back in the moment and they move with one, and it's an amazing experience when they all, and the energy support on this becomes such a strong class. That's what I could see and feel in Bikram. And I could go to Bikram class and be like no energy, and then the class, I receive the energy from the class and come away. And the way you can what's the word? Not host the room, but the way in which the room is challenged, and bringing them in the moment. It's an amazing practice. And when you get students actually that get it, so we're a lot of hard work, Donna, but when we're together, they get it, because you're cultivating that connection on the mat, goes into everyday life as well. So the yoke, the union, getting it there. Yeah.
Oh, I love how you put this. Thank you for sharing that. Also, you said earlier, social justice is part of yoga. I want to tell you that, like, in the last month, and I shared this in a previous episode near the end,
Mhm.
I heard that there was a yoga teacher training that was happening, which involves like teachers who are DEI teachers. It talked about inclusive language and making yoga accessible to all bodies. So I want to say that this training is one that I'm a little bit surprised that one of the lead teachers in that training said, if you're talking about social justice is out of your scope of practice as a yoga teacher.
That's very concerning.
It is.
It's very concerning if they're saying that. Yeah. It's very concerning, because it is, and it maybe shows a lack of understanding. Because for me, if ahimsa is at the root of what you're trying to cultivate, non-harm, that includes everybody. And social justice has to play a part in that. So I
I
can't
fully
understand
agree.
how they can extract that. I'd have to maybe sit down with them. And also, I'm not all as well, Shannon, because the way I teach it, it's not about saying you've got privilege and more than me. We all have privilege. And privilege, I love this definition. I'll maybe share it to you. But privilege is not having to deal with something you don't have. So, say for instance, you have somebody like a wheelchair user. They don't have the ability. They don't have the ability to go out and get on a bus like we do. So there's no inconvenience for us. So it's looking at those things. It's not saying, "Oh, Shannon, you've got more privilege because you live in this area or whatever." It's looking at that level, and by seeing that, that's how we can then use our privilege to create more equality and affect that change and appreciate what someone else is maybe going through, and not causing harm. Because without, if you go into a class, the language we use is so important. We can cause harm with what we say.
Mm-hmm.
But we
I
need to be
agree.
aware and going out there and making this wonderful practice accessible for everybody.
Do you think that what we're calling self-love is somehow connected to ahimsa? Is that what we're looking for when we say self-love?
I don't know. I think it's going to be an individual thing, but I think self-love, because self-love, non-harming of ourselves. So it's even how we talk to ourselves, our self-talk, because invariably you find that I have an exercise where I get people to write out their self-thoughts and put it on somebody else, and you can see how they cringe, and it's like, well, you're okay with saying it to yourself, but why are you doing that if you don't want to do that? And then it makes people think about what they're saying or thinking in that regard. So I think some elements of it could be, but some of it is sort of about the loving oneself, but not at that great depth. If in just cultivating self-love about just you, but when you cultivate self-love, I think then that love then comes out to everyone else as well.
I think so too. I know some people who I'm like, I think they have a lot of inner criticism, and then those are the people that sometimes I see them being critical of other people.
Yeah. Because
Yeah.
and I see that as well, and then what I then believe, Shannon, sometimes is they're not confident with themselves, and sometimes it can be seen as maybe jealousy that someone else can be confident in themselves. So they project on that person in terms of how they talk to that person. It can be very critical. So I think there's deeper stuff going on that maybe they haven't actually don't realize, but you can kind of see it by being more intentional and observing more. I believe that's where I've gained a greater understanding potentially, and with the work that I do as well.
How do our yoga teachers learn more from you? First of all, talk about your book. Where do they get your book?
They can find my book on is it on that website that not everyone, was it the rainforest that's
Oh
named
yeah,
after
the Ecosia one. I use that one all the time.
yeah. But and any other reputable website, a bookseller rather, we can get books normally. Singing Dragon, I think they're in US and Canada as well. So you can get anywhere basically. If you Google teaching body positive yoga, it will come up with a list of outlets where you can purchase it basically.
Okay. We'll put a link to Ecosia, the the equivalent to Google that plants trees, and we'll also put a link to bookshop.org that supports
Yeah,
local
yeah,
bookshops,
exactly.
and then your website. So, what else are you offering teachers if they want to learn from you?
So basically, what else do I offer? I've just started. I'm going to do the second iteration of this. I've started doing a mentoring program called Teaching Body Positive Yoga. So it's very much aligned to the book. So it's a 12-week mentoring program. I think we're halfway through. So I'm doing that, and that's going really really well. The feedback's been quite good because then it's going into greater depth of the book, but also the experiences that I have. So it's helping teachers to maybe avoid some of the things that I went through. So my lived experiences helps them as well in that respect. I also I teach classes online as well. I'm loving doing wheel yoga. I'm loving that as well because that's an underused prop, but I love it. So I do workshops on that. So I'm teaching people how to utilize that in workshops. Also, I do DEI workshops, body positive workshops as well. So just follow me or on social media or on the website to see what my offerings are. I'm getting better. I sort of just do them randomly, but I'm trying to be more structured and have them so that people can see as and when they're up so they can plan for them.
That's amazing. Thank you so much. We'll put all of those links in our show notes. And if our listeners have questions, they can also post them in the comments there. Just thank you for the work that you're doing. And thanks for coming to talk to us about this.
Thank you for having me. It's been a lovely conversation with you.
Thank you so much, Donna, for this amazing conversation today. Thank you, Connected Yoga teachers, for listening to this inspiring conversation. I hope you found it helpful. I hope you found it soothing. And I just wanted to share some key takeaways. And I don't always do this, but I want to leave you with some questions to close out the episode. And maybe you want to take one of these and actually move it into an action step for yourself or sharing yoga out into the world. And if you feel like you're really led to answer these questions or give feedback, you can do that in a few ways. You can share your comments in our Connected Yoga Teacher Facebook group. You could leave a comment in the show notes, or you can leave us a voice message and let me know if I can share it on the podcast or if it's just specifically meant for me to listen to. So in order to do all of those things, head on over to the connectedyogateacher.com. Right on our homepage, you can see where you can join our Facebook community. You can also see a button there to leave me a voicemail. And if you want to go to the show notes page, that's the connectedyogateacher.com/389, or you could search for Donna Noble or self-acceptance. You'll be able to find the episode that way. So here are my key takeaways with some questions. So number one is, I truly believe that yoga is for everyone. And lots of people don't feel that. So it's not about how we can be bendy and flexible and do something really cool with our body. Today, Donna talked about how yoga is about mindfulness, connection, and breath work. And so I'm curious, what is yoga to you? And I love that my good friend Jivana often asks this question. And so it's a good one to sit with. What does yoga really mean to you? Number two key takeaway is self-acceptance is really key. So how can we embrace who we are? And how can we encourage our yoga students to do that? I love being in a yoga class where the teacher encourages self-acceptance. And so I've just asked you, what cues do you share when you're teaching a yoga class that would encourage self-acceptance? Number three, gratitude and mindfulness. So I really find this in two ways in my own life. When I'm out in nature, maybe I'm walking, maybe I'm gardening, or when I'm doing yoga, including meditation. So these two things really help me to be more present and appreciative. And so my question is, what helps you to stop comparing yourself to others and be grateful for what you have in this exact moment? Number four is inclusive yoga spaces. And number five is social justice in yoga, and these go hand in hand. So let's first cover number four, inclusive yoga spaces. I believe that yoga teachers have a responsibility to acknowledge our biases and create environments that really care for all beings with their unique life experiences. And if you're thinking, well, how do we make sure that we're doing that? If you would like to learn more and sharpen your skills, we have a whole library of podcast episodes that focus on teaching more inclusive yoga. So the question I'd leave you with is, how do you make sure that students are feeling welcome and included in your yoga classes, in your yoga space? And then also another question, do you remember the last time that you felt really included and welcome in a yoga space? And what was that like? So as I said, number five is social justice in yoga. True yoga aligns with the principles of inclusivity and compassion, where we are all working to advocate for equity and accessibility. And again, like I said, we have this library of podcast episodes that are all about this and all about anti-oppression. So if anyone is telling you, or if you ever hear this message out there that social justice and yoga don't go hand in hand, please, if you can send them a link to these episodes. We'll link to it in the show notes. And also, I would be asking questions, about yoga philosophy. It's so intertwined with social justice. And I guess my question on that is, if we take that out of yoga, are we even doing yoga? I hope that Donna's story today and the insights she shared really helps us to create more mindful, inclusive yoga spaces. And I hope that we also create that internally as well. So thank you for being here. Thank you for having a listen all the way to the end. I've got some more snow to shovel. That's something that is filling up the weekend. Also, Sage and I are doing a chocolate chip cookie contest between the two of us to see who can make the best chocolate chip cookies. She's made hers. They're really good. I'm not sure I can beat that, but I'm going to try. I want to say thank you to you, dear listener, for being here for this episode today, for creating amazing, inclusive spaces where people can cultivate self-acceptance. And I also want to say a thank you to our incredible team who brings this podcast to life each and every episode. As we wrap up today, I'm of course going to leave you with a question that I like to close out most episodes with. What will you be doing this week to stay connected to yourself, your yoga practice, and to your community so that you can share the yoga that lights you up?